Welcome back, everybody, to the table. And we are here today with a very special guest who Alan is going to introduce. Who do we have today?
Well, we have my wife, Barbara Amavisca, and we've asked her to come. Normally, we're telling people, if you ask us a good question, we'll have you come. And in this case, we kind of flipped it because if you remember, if you were here last week or last time we spoke, we ended the conversation talking about relationship and the importance of having a good relationship with people that you're engaged in important conversation with. And we talked about the need to understand how in the world do you have a good relationship with someone, right? And right. We thought, Barbara is so good at cultivating relationships with people. I can attest to that after 44 years. And difficult people and nice people too, but especially difficult people. And so we asked Barb if she would come, and here she is to help us understand, how do we do relationship in a genuine way with someone that we want to get to know and really want to have a relationship with, so that we're not just, like I said, it's about not conquering the person, but actually knowing the person. What do you think?
So for me, when I started to really look at relationships and how they function, one of the first things that comes to my mind when you want to really have a relationship with someone is that you start paying attention to them. So when you pay attention to someone, if you really want to love someone, the first thing you have to do is pay attention, right? So there's a girl that you like.
Yeah.
You pay attention to her, you don't ignore her. So in order to show her that you're interested, you're paying attention. That's how you start to show love. And the next thing that you start to do is listen. So if you really want to know someone, if you really want to love them well, you have to listen to them. You have to ask them questions. You have to find out who they are. You have to go to that place where your desire for knowledge about this person that you love outweighs anything else. And so you're at that point, you're expressing your attention and your love to someone by asking them questions and by listening to them. And how this flows into what we've been talking about in terms of reaching out to people and helping to share the love of Christ with them is that we don't want to just barge in and start talking to people. We want to communicate God's love to them. And God listens to us. Amazing thing. God actually listens to us. Scripture is full of verses that talk about how God hears us. That's just an amazing concept when we think about
that is
how God actually hears us and listens to us.
So how do we make that real in our context?
What does it look like to be really practically good at that?
How do you know when someone how do you know when someone's really listening to you versus taking notes for a response or something like that?
That's a good point.
The kinds of communication tools that we look at when someone is really paying attention. One is eye contact. Somebody's, looking at you in the eyes, maybe leaning in a little bit, asking good questions, not looking on their phone, not looking at their watch to see what time it is. They're really in tune with what you're saying. They're not thinking about what they're going to say next. They're, not in a hurry. Just, those kinds of things that are communicating to someone that, they're paying attention. It's all about paying attention. right?
Yeah, that reminds me. I bumped into this quote in a book I was reading. Actually, and I now know it's from Jim Elliot. It's like wherever you are, be all there. So that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. So when I first started paying attention to this concept, I was realizing that there was a couple of people in my life that were really good listeners. And I was drawn to them because they listened to me. They weren't just talking at me. They were really listening to me. And that was an aha moment for me.
What are a couple of the images that you have of those people that communicated that you had their total attention?
They were really interested in what I was saying. And I was totally convinced that they were interested in what I was saying and that what I was saying was valid and important to them. And so they were not necessarily people that I knew well. They were not necessarily friends, but they were people that were really just kind of leaning in and wanted to hear what I had to say about something. And I felt very affirmed by that.
Yeah, I actually remember feeling that way around you, Barb. Actually, just it feels like I should mention when we, created the table podcast. I think a lot of the way we're framing our conversations are actually significantly influenced by the things that you shared with us at this table, my wife and I included, among others. And I don't think I had very many conversations with someone like I had with you, where it was like, usually someone's looking at their watch. So when's this guy going to be over? How much longer do we have this guy? But I remember seeing that in you. And then when you took time to share with us kind of a little bit of what you're sharing today. And I remember one of the things you said to me, which was really, really important. Showing people you listen has a lot to do also with the way you respond to them. Like the listening part is one. But if I just sit there and stare at you and hear the vibrations in my eardrums, that's part of it. But part of the other thing that you showed me was reflecting back and showing that you understood.
Yeah.
That's a whole different thing, because you might be getting it in your head, but they maybe don't know that until you say, so what you're saying is
right.
So I remember that was really helpful.
Well, why don't we, okay, so that is a really important point. But for some people, that may be a new phrase. So talk to us a bit about reflecting.
Well, I learned this from Barb. So what I remembered her saying about this, and what I found in my experience, is that reflecting isn't saying the same thing back to them, immediately, repeating, regurgitating the same words in an effort to appear like you're paying attention. It has a lot to do with taking those words in, really thinking about them, contemplating, and asking clarifying questions about things that as you contemplate, you don't understand. For example, like what you just did. You said, well, can you help me understand a little bit more what you mean by reflecting? I was saying that. I know you heard me because you were paying attention in a way that caused you to ask that question. And I find that those people that stop and want to clarify what you meant, they're actually listening to you. So reflection is just that process of almost clarifying and letting that person know, I heard what you're saying, without saying, oh yeah, I hear you. Although that can be a great way of affirming that. It's even better when you repackage what they're saying in a way that you understand.
Right. And I think all too often when we're in conversations, what we get back from people is what they want to say next. And so by by entering into that last thing that you said, it helps me to know that you did hear me and that you're not just thinking about your own experience and how you want to share that.
Yes.
But you're really hearing what I said.
That's actually a really, you know what? Actually, Barb, can I ask you a question? What are the other things that show us we're not listening besides the attention? Like you mentioned just one right now, that if I'm sitting here and I respond super quickly with something totally different, it may show I'm not paying attention. We'll review that. What are some other kind of, bad ideas, if you could put it, or faux pas in this that you've seen yourself or others commit, that show you and indicate to you that they're not listening?
Well, one of the really significant ways that we can show someone that we're paying attention is to be picking up on their feeling words. So if I'm telling you how I feel about something and you just let it go over your head, then I know that you really haven't heard what I'm saying.
Right.
But if you come back to that feeling word and ask me a question about it, then it makes me more apt to go deeper into that conversation, because I know that, I've given you just a little bit and you've picked it up.
Right.
And now I'm willing to give you a little bit more.
Right.
So I'm really always testing the waters with my feelings to know how much I can trust you with. So if I'm telling you something and you respond back with your own story, I will probably not go deeper with you. But if you come back and say, oh, I hear you're really frustrated about that, or sounds like you're angry, you're giving me a reflective statement, then it makes me kind of think a little bit more about my own feelings about things. And it may not even be something that I've really thought about before, but it helps me to think through why I feel the way that I do. And we can then have a conversation that's going to be significant to me and make me feel heard.
Very cool.
Yeah, that's been my experience too, actually. Yes.
Well, to take this into the realm of conversations about faith with others, what you just said, honey, am I allowed to say that on a podcast? What you just said, Ms. Barbara, it brings to mind Rick Warren, pastor in Southern California, who started a church down in South County about, 40 years ago or so. And he started not by holding services or anything like that. He just went door to door and asked people, what is it you don't like about the idea of being part of a church? And he just took notes. And I don't know how many, it was in the thousands. I don't know how many homes it was, but he went to like thousands of homes. And just at each home, do you go to church? Oh, I don't want to talk to you. Do you not go? Oh, good. Tell me why you don't. What is it that you find so off-putting about that? And that's what informed the way he was going to pastor. And it isn't the normal thing. Normally, well, I won't say normally, but often when we get into faith conversations, I think there's this idea that we have to, do our thing and
share our part first.
Yeah, and what he did was really very counterintuitive in that he just listened. And so I know that did have a significant impact on the willingness of people to become a part of what he was doing. So that's really. Well, I don't know. Is there anything in the life of Jesus that you can think of that reflects good listening?
I mean, a lot. That's for sure.
Like anything?
Well, one of my favorite conversations that Jesus has is with these two disciples that are on the way to Emmaus. This is at the end of Luke's gospel. And essentially the story goes that these two disciples, they were disciples of Jesus. Jesus had been crucified. And unbeknownst to them, he's resurrected. And he's actually listening in on their conversation. And the text says that Jesus goes up to them and says, "What are you talking about? Like, I hear you guys are talking about something. What is it that you're talking about?" And kind of like what you were saying, Bob, he showed interest and reflected, and they said, "How do you not know about this? Jesus was this mighty man who did all these deeds, and he's gone now." And he said, oh, okay. In his head, he's thinking, "Oh, so they don't know who I am. All right." But it's funny is he didn't barge in immediately. He didn't barge in. He walked with them, it says, for quite a time.
Yeah.
And then invited them to have dinner. And it wasn't until they had dinner that they recognized who he was. And I think that actually, in a way, is emblematic of the way we've seen people interact with Jesus as we have dialogues. Is it's really not this big barging in conversation. It's trying to tap into what they're already thinking about things like God, like how Jesus did with these two men.
Questions and food and tea.
And tea. Yes. And then, having literally walking on that journey until they realize at the table, "Oh, there's Jesus. Oh, I didn't see that before." But, I've seen that over and over in my life with people that I've been with on both sides, as I talked about, with you, Barb. That was something I received from you. As a result, I love to give that to other people, especially they call it the poetic phrase when they say something that is like an emotional word or repeated word. I'll usually stop and go.
The gift of listening, huh?
Yeah.
Very nice.
So.
Yeah, listening is a gift that we give others. And we know that it's not something that can be required. People can hear you. They can be hearing with their ears and totally checked out.
Right.
But it is a gift that we give. And I think that as disciples of Jesus, we imitate him when we pay attention to people and love them the way that Jesus did.
Yeah. It was like the quote you shared before. You said that disciples are like walking listeners.
Yeah.
And I loved when you shared that with me earlier, because I was like, oh my gosh, what a succinct way to put something that's so profoundly weighty if it's put into practice, And disciples are walking learners, like you were saying.
Yeah.
That is true. If we do that, we are loving people. I can't think of one time that I felt, unloved when someone was taking the time.
That's right.
I can't think of one time. And it doesn't matter who it was. Just took the time to listen.
Yeah.
And what a very practical way to show people God's love.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Barbara, for coming and sharing a little bit of your wisdom. And if you would like to know more about the kind of things Barbara's talking about, shoot us an email and we can pass it on to Barbara. And if you have any questions for her and or for us, right? We will listen.
We will listen. And that's actually, a good way to probably end this is that's actually our commitment at the table, which is why we wanted to have you on from the very first day.
Yeah.
Because that commitment to listening is what this is about. It's not about just barging in. It's about taking the time to sit, have a cup of tea, and really think about some questions that people really do have that are hard to consider.
Right.
So thank you for
You're very
much.
welcome.
for coming with us to do this and for also making that huge impact in my life. I will be sure to keep
And in mine.
and to continue to pass it on. Yeah.
It's a pleasure.
And feel free to drop those comments in there. If you have anything that you'd like to ask, as Alan was saying, we'd love to hear from you. We'd love to have you on the show as well. If you have a question that you want to discuss and have some tea over, we would love to invite you to pull up a chair to the table. Until then, we will see you later.
Yeah. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.